Imperator Rome was released on the 25th of April 2019, precisely 1 year ago today, and has gone through some quite radical changes since then. On release, it was slated for its lack of character, flavour and life, and in this video I'm going to go over what I consider to be the top 10 biggest changes to the game. Sit back and enjoy. In the release version of Imperator Rome, we only had one kind of ship, the trireme. This could only be built as well if you had wood in the province itself. So for example, down here in Galilee, we can build a trireme, but a little bit further south in Samaria, because there is no wood, we can't build any ships at all, despite having a port. Navies also did not have tactics, so naval combat in this version of the game was a case of who had more ships, who had a better commander, and who had modifiers to their ships. There was nothing else that you could do. Since the Pompey patch, ship types are much more varied. The trireme remains and no longer requires wood to construct, but we have another 5 types of boats to go along with it, with the heaviest ones still requiring that wood resource. Naval battles are therefore much more varied, especially when you include the addition of naval tactics into the mix, like frontal assault or naval envelopment. In the release version of Imperator Rome, laws were quite different, and none more so than for tribes. Not only do we have to pay for them with oratory power, but they're nowhere near as structured. So, like we have here, monthly centralization going up for bureaucratic focus, but if we go with nomadic heritage, we have negative centralization. That is very different. In the Cicero update, tribes got 2 very distinct paths that they can go down, either following the left path towards decentralization and changing into a migratory tribe, or going down the right-hand path towards centralization and eventual civilization as a monarchy or a republic. In the Livy update, the final decision to change your government type switched from being a decision you took to being a part of the mission tree system. Speaking of the mission tree system, in the release version of the game, there were no mission trees. There was no structure to the way that you expanded, other than via events. Countries like Rome, Macedon, Phrygia may have some events to guide their expansion in various areas, but nothing compared to what we have now. Mission trees were added with the Livy update, giving every country a set of objectives and goals to strive towards. The generic missions came in a couple of flavors, developing your nation and conquering a region. DLCs also have added mission trees to various countries too, with Rome and Carthage getting them in the Punic Wars DLC that came alongside Livy. Stability in the release version of Imperator Rome goes from -3 to +3, and the way that you change it is by instantly clicking a button to gain 1 stability. Not so interesting. Stability was changed with the Cicero update, and now instead of a scale of -3 to +3, we have a scale from 0 to 100. Like a lot of things in the Cicero update, stability stopped being an instant action, and instead it changed to over time much more granularly. You could still stab a pig or burn some incense to increase it, but instead of instantly gaining 1 stability, you would add a modifier that would slowly increase stability over time. Religion has changed quite a bit too in Imperator Rome, in no place as much as for omens. What we used to have to do is spend 200 religious power, and then for 5 years we would get a bonus, giving us either discipline, manpower. They were different for each religion. Having this time of 5 years go down was actually a valuable thing, so you could choose something that is more applicable to the situation you currently find yourself in. So there are quite a few inventions that would change omen time to be a negative. Omens changed with Cicero, no longer having any price other than the opportunity cost, but otherwise kept much of the same mechanics. However, with the Archimedes update, omens changed quite drastically. Now each country has their own pantheon, and you can decide if a god deserves to be in that pantheon. Your patron god doesn't have to be of your own religion either, as if you own the territory where the holy site to a foreign god is, you can choose to honor that deity, giving a happiness boost to all pops of the same religious faith as that god. Each god has its own omen bonus, with both a passive effect that will always be enabled, and another that is only enabled when you call down an omen. In the release version of Imperator, every single character was a member of a family that could become scorned if you did not give them what they considered to be an adequate amount of jobs. And with dozens of families in your nation, this became quite unmanageable. Loyalty was also quite different, being granular in scale, affected by ticking modifiers that often made it quite easy to avoid civil wars and other problems, purely because you had so much forewarning before a character became a problem. In the Livy update, this was changed so that a nation would have a set number of great families, with the rest of the characters in your nation being considered minor. Smaller nations had fewer major families, with a minor family being promoted when your nation went up in power. Only major families could be considered scorned. With loyalty, gone is the granular sliding scale, and instead we have instant modifiers to a static loyalty system. While this sounds like a regression, in practice this means that your characters take a lot more effort to manage, which in my opinion at least improves this aspect of the game significantly. In the release version of Imperator, pops were really quite static and lifeless. You could spend some of your mana points to promote, convert, assimilate, or move your pops, and this was instantaneous. If you wanted, for example, this freeman to be a citizen, he is. If you wanted this tribesman to now be a freeman, he is. Cicero radically overhauled the pop system, removing the instant actions and having your pops convert and assimilate over time. Promotion was changed too, as each territory had a desired ratio of the different pop types, with pops promoting and demoting to this ratio over time. Another change was to migration, with only slaves being able to be manually moved as a civilized nation, and slaves and tribesmen as a tribe. Your other pops would migrate on their own to territories with high migration attraction, which is affected by civilization value, buildings, and the available pop capacity of the territory. This added a lot of life to the pops, and made them seem more like living people rather than just numbers in a UI. In the release version of the game, every single territory on the map was the same, having the same 4 building options: the marketplace, training camp, fortress, and the granary. This, as you can imagine, wasn't very good. Cicero changed territories into being either a city or a settlement, with each having a distinct set of possible buildings. A city acted much like the release version, with an extra building slot being added every 10 pops, but for settlements, only 1 building could ever be constructed. Additionally, settlements were the only territories that could produce food. Speaking of food, the release version of Imperator really didn't have a food mechanic. While we did have the food trade goods of grain, fish, livestock, and vegetables, none of these added to any kind of food stockpile. They were just modifiers to population capacity or population growth. Food got a couple of changes in the game. First with the Cicero update, which changed it so that some settlements produced food that your pops would consume. Settlements were the only territories that could produce the food trade goods, and you could construct farms in these territories to increase the amount of food that they would produce. Cities were able to construct granary buildings, which would then increase the food capacity of the province, with pop growth being determined by how many years of food supply you had there. If your province ran out of food, your population capacity would tank, and you would rapidly begin losing pops to starvation and migration. Then with the Livy update, armies started using food too. Attrition from being in another nation's territory was gone, and each army had its own food capacity, carried around both by your cohorts and a new unit, the supply train. Only when your army ran out of food would you begin to take attrition. The biggest change of all, though, was to mana. You had your 4 different monarch power types, and these were largely dictated by how good your ruler was. These points were spent pretty much everywhere, from the aforementioned pop changes to also things like supporting rebels and fabricating claims. These powers were everywhere. Cicero removed mana entirely, with everything that was previously dictated by your magic monarch points either getting a new cost like money for inventions, tyranny for smearing reputation, or no cost at all like omens, or using one of the 2 new resource types. Firstly, political influence, which is gained mostly through the loyalty of characters in your offices, with your ruler's corruption being a modifier on that monthly gain. This is spent on many diplomatic actions and the new provincial investments mechanic. The second is military experience, which is gained through the average experience of your cohorts, which can now be drilled. Every 10 military experience gave you plus 1% morale of your troops. It also spent on your military traditions, which cost 100 each. Not everyone likes every single change that has been made to the game. Some of the changes, like the mission trees and the loyalty changes, have been really quite controversial, but I think it's undeniable that over the past year the game has changed massively for the better, and it is a better product now than it was on release. If you have a different set of changes that you think are bigger or change the game in a better way than the ones I have here, let me know in the comments section below. And if you want to know more about these changes and you want to see my opinion on them, tonight I will be doing a live stream with Vespasian talking about all the different changes, our opinions on them, and what we want to see for the future. If you're watching this in the future, then there will be a link to that live stream in the description below. Thank you oh so very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.